More than 2.5 millennia ago, there lived a king whose shadow still lingers across history. A man both feared and admired. A conqueror who built one of the greatest empires the ancient world had ever seen, and a ruler whose pride brought him to the edge of madness. This is the story of Nebuchadnezzar, the mighty king of Babylon. His name echoes in the pages of the Bible, in ancient clay tablets, and in the ruins of a city once called the Jewel of Mesopotamia. To some, Nebuchadnezzar was chosen by the gods to establish dominion over nations. To others, he was the tyrant who enslaved people, destroyed holy places, and defied the divine. But who was he really? A visionary? A monster? Or simply a man trapped between destiny and his own pride? To understand Nebuchadnezzar, we must step back into a time when Babylon stood at the crossroads of the ancient world. The 6th century before Christ was an age of turmoil. The Assyrian Empire, once unstoppable, had crumbled into dust. Egypt struggled to cling to its fading glory. Kingdoms rose and fell like waves on a restless sea. And in the midst of this chaos, Babylon rose again. The ancient city, once humbled, was reborn in splendor and ambition. It was here that Nebuchadnezzar, the son of Nabopolassar, seized the throne and began his relentless march toward immortality. Babylon under Nebuchadnezzar was not just a kingdom. It was a dream of stone, fire, and divine aspiration. Massive walls encircled the city, stretching for miles, so thick that chariots could race across their tops. Mighty gates made of bronze, decorated with lions and dragons, guarded every entrance. These were not mere defenses. They were declarations, statements to the world that Babylon was eternal, unconquerable, chosen. And at the heart of this city, a wonder that would echo in the imagination of generations to come: the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. Legends say Nebuchadnezzar built them for his queen, who longed for the green hills of her homeland. Yet his greatness was not confined to walls and gardens. It was forged on the battlefield. In 605 BC, Nebuchadnezzar, then still the crown prince, faced the mighty Egyptians and their allies at the Battle of Carchemish. It was a clash that would decide the fate of the Near East. Babylon's armies crushed their foes with overwhelming force, securing supremacy over lands that stretched from the Euphrates to the borders of Egypt. From that moment, Nebuchadnezzar was no longer a mere prince. He was the master of an empire. But conquest did not end there. His eyes turned westward, toward the small but defiant kingdom of Judah, with its holy city of Jerusalem. Nebuchadnezzar's armies marched with fire and iron, laying siege, capturing kings, and taking hostages. Among those carried into Babylonian exile was a young man named Daniel, whose life and visions would forever tie the name of Nebuchadnezzar to the unfolding story of prophecy. It was not only power Nebuchadnezzar sought, but legacy. He ordered temples rebuilt, palaces raised, and ziggurat stairways to the heavens, erected in honor of the gods of Babylon. Each brick bore his name, stamped into the clay, as if to remind eternity who had built this city of wonders. He saw himself not merely as a king, but as the chosen instrument of the divine. And yet, behind the brilliance of his reign, there was a darker shadow. For pride grew in his heart, the pride of a man who believed no power could oppose him. His enemies trembled. His people worshipped his strength. And Nebuchadnezzar began to see himself as more than a king, almost as a god. This is not just the story of an empire. It is the story of power, pride, and punishment. The story of how Nebuchadnezzar rose to the heights of glory and how, in a single moment, he would be brought to his knees. Nebuchadnezzar's empire stretched across the ancient world like a golden crown. Nations bowed, kings paid tribute, and Babylon stood as the unrivaled heart of power. Yet within the walls of his palace, something far greater than military conquest was unfolding. Among the exiles brought from Jerusalem were young men of noble birth captives, chosen not for their weakness, but for their wisdom, beauty, and strength. They were trained in the language and culture of the Babylonians, prepared to serve in the royal court. Among them was Daniel. Daniel was not like the others. His loyalty was not to Babylon's gods or to the king's table, but to the God of Israel. And it was through him that Nebuchadnezzar would encounter mysteries beyond his understanding. One night, the mighty king was troubled by a dream, a vision so disturbing that sleep fled from him. He summoned the magicians, astrologers, and wise men of Babylon, demanding not only the interpretation, but the dream itself. If they failed, they would be executed. Terror spread through the court, for no man could reveal what the king had dreamed, no man except one. Daniel prayed, and the secret was revealed to him by the God of heaven. When he stood before Nebuchadnezzar, he did not claim wisdom for himself, but declared that there was a God who reveals mysteries. And then he spoke. The king had dreamed of a colossal statue. Its head was of gold, its chest and arms of silver, its belly and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, and its feet partly of iron and partly of clay. Then a stone, not cut by human hands, struck the statue, shattering it into pieces. And the stone grew into a mountain that filled the whole earth. Nebuchadnezzar trembled as Daniel explained. The head of gold was Babylon, his kingdom, strong and glorious. But after him would come others, silver, bronze, iron, and finally, a divided kingdom, fragile as clay. In the end, the kingdoms of men would fall, and the God of heaven would establish a kingdom that would never be destroyed.
For a moment, the king who believed himself invincible was confronted with the truth. His reign, though magnificent, was temporary. His power, though vast, was not eternal. But pride is not easily broken. Despite this revelation, Nebuchadnezzar ordered a massive golden image to be built. Not just its head, but the entire statue, as if to defy the prophecy. It towered over the plain of Dura, gleaming in the sun, a monument to his glory. At its dedication, all peoples, nations, and languages were commanded to bow down and worship when the music sounded. And yet, 3 young men, companions of Daniel, refused. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego would not bow, for they worshipped only the God of heaven. Enraged, Nebuchadnezzar ordered them cast into a blazing furnace, heated 7 times hotter than usual. Soldiers who carried them were slain by the flame's fury, but inside the fire, the 3 walked unharmed. And with them appeared a 4th figure, radiant, like a son of the gods. When Nebuchadnezzar saw this, his arrogance gave way to awe. He called the men out of the fire, astonished to see not even their hair singed, not even the smell of smoke upon them. In that moment, he proclaimed that no other god could save in this way. But Nebuchadnezzar's story was not yet finished. His pride still simmered beneath the surface. For even as he acknowledged the God of heaven, he continued to see himself as the master of the world. Babylon thrived under his rule. Temples rose higher, walls grew stronger, and the city shone like a jewel upon the Euphrates. Travelers rode of its grandeur, merchants flocked to its gates, and rulers trembled at its name. And yet, deep within the heart of its king, a storm was gathering. For Nebuchadnezzar would soon face not only visions of stone and fire, but a judgment that would strike at the very core of his being. But the God who reveals mysteries had yet another message for Nebuchadnezzar, one that struck not his empire, but his very soul. One night, the king dreamed again. This time he saw a mighty tree, its top reaching to the heavens. Its leaves were abundant, its fruit plentiful, and the beasts of the field found shelter in its shade while the birds of the sky dwelt in its branches. The tree was a symbol of life, of strength, of provision. But suddenly, a messenger from heaven came down, crying out, "Cut down the tree, strip off its branches, scatter its fruit, let the animals flee from its shade." Only the stump, bound with iron and bronze, was to remain. And then the decree was given. Let his mind be changed from that of a man, and let him be given the mind of an animal, until 7 times pass over him, so that the living may know that the Most High rules the kingdom of men, and gives it to whom he will. Nebuchadnezzar awoke, troubled and fearful. Again, it was Daniel who stood before him, explaining the vision. The tree, magnificent and towering, was Nebuchadnezzar himself. His greatness had reached to the heavens. His dominion stretched to the ends of the earth. But because of his pride, he would be humbled, driven away from men. He would live with the beasts of the field, eating grass like an ox, until he acknowledged that heaven rules over all. Daniel pleaded with him, "O king, renounce your sins by doing what is right, and your wickedness by being kind to the oppressed. Perhaps then your prosperity will continue." But Nebuchadnezzar did not listen. 12 months later, as he walked upon the roof of his royal palace in Babylon, he looked out over the city and said to himself, "Is not this the great Babylon I have built as the royal residence, by my mighty power and for the glory of my majesty?" And even as the words left his lips, a voice from heaven declared, "O King Nebuchadnezzar, to you it is spoken. The kingdom has departed from you. You will be driven from among men and live with the beasts of the field. 7 times will pass over you, until you acknowledge that the Most High rules over the kingdoms of men and gives them to whom he will." In an instant, the ruler of the greatest empire on earth was struck down. His sanity left him. He was driven into the wild, his body drenched with the dew of heaven, his hair growing like eagle's feathers, his nails like the claws of a bird. The mighty king became like a beast, crawling upon the earth, humbled before the eyes of men and angels. The golden crown was gone, the throne was empty, and Babylon's king, who once saw himself as a god, now roamed the fields like cattle. But after the appointed time, mercy came. Nebuchadnezzar lifted his eyes toward heaven, and his reason returned. He was restored to his throne, greater than before, but this time his heart was changed. No longer did he boast of his glory. Instead, he declared, "I, Nebuchadnezzar, raised my eyes toward heaven, and my sanity was restored. Then I praised the Most High. I honored and glorified him who lives forever. His dominion is an eternal dominion. His kingdom endures from generation to generation. All the peoples of the earth are regarded as nothing. He does as he pleases with the powers of heaven and the peoples of the earth. No one can hold back his hand or say to him, 'What have you done?' The king who once believed himself invincible now confessed that only the God of heaven holds true sovereignty. The dream of the statue, the fiery furnace, the tree cut down, all had led to this moment. A pagan ruler brought to his knees, not by the strength of armies, but by the power of the Almighty." And so ends the tale of Nebuchadnezzar, conqueror of nations, builder of empires, yet ultimately a man humbled by the hand of God. His life stands as both a warning and a testimony that pride goes before a fall, and that even the mightiest must bow before the King of Kings.